So please make sure to fill that out for us. Keep a lookout for all of the monthly company convo invitations in your inbox. Next month is Zymergen, which is a really cool company, followed by PG&E and Uber. So we have really, really exciting stuff coming up. Please also share on social media and give Stephanie and MESA a shout out using the hashtag MESA Company Convos. And during the session, feel free to use the Q&A or chat function to ask your questions. Don't be shy. This is your chance to ask questions in a low stress setting. But if you are inclined, you're more than welcome to submit a question as an anonymous person. We are absolutely happy to ask that for you using the Q&A function. And let's try out the chat. If everybody can say hi, happy Friday, and add their school, that would be great. Awesome, thank you. So now I'm going to introduce our panelists for today. So we have Stephanie Rosales, and she grew up in Southern California and went on to attend San Francisco State University for her degree in electrical engineering. She worked at PG&E right after college, but knew she always had a passion for games. And after returning home to LA, she eventually landed a job as a quality assurance tester at Naughty Dog on one of their biggest titles, The Last of Us Part 2. And in an effort to expand on the already extensive accessibility options, she used her electrical engineering knowledge to build a more universal controller that would help players that need an alternative form of motor control. And after the game's release, she joined Riot Games' first-person shooter game Valorant as a QA engineer to ensure the game is compatible across a wide variety of hardware and meets performance expectations. And as a personal goal, she strives to get more accessibility options made in games, and she's modified her universal controller to be compatible with Valorant to show what can be possible, and hopes for the gaming industry to build more accessibility options for players, which is really, really awesome. Stephanie continues improving the inclusivity of video games industry as a key member of Riot Games Diversity and Inclusion Council, which helps amplify the voices of marginalized groups. So everyone, please use the chat and welcome Stephanie.
Thank you so much. Nice, awesome. So I have a short presentation to talk about Riot Games in case it's the first time for anyone hearing about the company. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, cool. Awesome. So yeah, I'm super excited to do this for MESA. I was part of the program at San Francisco State University under Dr. Ozer, and I loved the program. It definitely helped me, especially with my interview skills and just meeting professionals in the industry. And I highly recommend just participating in every event that you can. So yeah, I'll go ahead and get started and talk about Riot Games. Ooh, my slide's not going. Okay, so I'll share a little bit about the history of the company, what I do as a QA engineer, and what I do on Valorant, because that is the game I work on. And I'll leave the rest of the presentation for any questions. So Riot Games. It was founded in 2006 by Brandon Beck and Mark Merrill. They were the co-founders and CEOs of the company, but recently got changed to Nicolas Laurent. And their first game that they launched was League of Legends in 2009. And that was the only game they launched for 10 years. They wanted to be player focused. So they just, for some reason, only wanted to focus on League of Legends and improved it over time. And then finally in 2019, they launched Teamfight Tactics. 2020, they launched Legends of Runeterra. That's their card game, which is very similar to Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering. And just last year, they launched Valorant, which is the game I work on. It's their first-person shooter. And recently, they launched Wild Rift, which is the mobile version of League of Legends. So a little bit about the company culture. They have over 3,000 employees across the world. I am located at the LAX office. I know there's 18 offices around the world, but I'm in LA, and they strive to be a player-focused company. So we're constantly on social media looking for feedback and also addressing issues. I'm on Twitter and Reddit all the time for this. Whenever we see something egregious pop up or something's getting a lot of upvotes, we try to address it and see if we can fix it. Riot Games is also very diversity and inclusion focused. We want to make sure the game reaches a wide audience through hardware, and that's through making the game optimized so it can play on a laptop, versus having a heavy, like a heavy gaming machine. And also through character representation, we want to make sure we get that right. And also along with hiring marginalized groups. And in addition to that, we have company perks, which includes a full service cafeteria. They feed breakfast, lunch, and dinner for free. They have a coffee bar, smoothie bar. There's a game room. And although we have been working from home this pandemic, so I haven't been able to experience those perks. So now I'll talk about what I do as a QA engineer. QA engineers are part of the development team. So I work with software engineers and there's a tech lead. I'm part of all their meetings. I always give my input. Whenever a code change is made by one of the engineers I work with, I help create a test plan. I seek help from other QA testers and vendors for testing to make sure the change is validated. And I also help make data-informed decisions. So I have the power to stop a change from going out if I felt it was risky or not enough testing was done for it. And working on Valorant in particular. So this is different from a studio that you're going into that is developing the game and hasn't been released yet. So since Valorant is a live service game, we focus on releasing patches. If you play the game, you may notice there is a patch that goes out every 2 weeks. So that is our basically sprint cycle. The entire team will play test. There are several play tests a day, and some sprints may focus on bug fixes that are currently out on live that we may have missed in a play test, and it's in combination of plan changes internally. One thing that I think is cool about this is that we can give feedback to any team on a new feature. So whenever playtest is done, they'll tell us, hey, this new thing is coming out. Please share your feedback. And Valorant also has their own diversity and inclusion team, which is separate from Riot Games. And this team in particular tries to make sure agent representation is done correctly. And we also try to work on more diverse hires. And yeah, I'll now open it up. You can feel free to ask me anything about Riot Games. Of course, I can't share stuff that's under NDA.
So Stephanie, thank you so much for that presentation. We have a couple questions that have come in, but before I ask those, I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about your experience as a MESA student and how being a MESA alum has impacted you in your career.
Ooh, okay. I'm trying to remember when I first joined. I was at San Francisco State from 2012 to 2015. And I must have joined MESA my last 2 years of school. And I tried to participate in everything they did. I enjoyed going to the conference. I was in the mock interview. I was even part of the mentorship program through Cisco. So I was assigned to a professional in the industry. I got to visit the Cisco campus and basically have one-on-one time with the professional. And they even put us through an interview at the end. And I know some people got hired to work at Cisco from that program, but I already had a job offer from Pacific Gas and Electric. So that's a job I went for after I graduated.
Awesome, thank you. So somebody asked a question on about any tips or knowledge for those who want to be in the game design parts of these companies while coming from more of a developer background. If you have any tips for them, that would be great.
Ooh, going into game design. I don't know. When I worked as a QA analyst at Naughty Dog, a lot of people that were in the QA group wanted to be a game designer, and they sort of used the QA role as a foot in the door. Just get in the industry, work with the developers at Naughty Dog, and maybe you can get a game design role through there. But that's not the only path. So by developer background, do you mean software engineering or?
I imagine so. They didn't specifically state.
Okay.
That would be my guess.
I'm not sure specifically for game design because that's not my background or my job title. I'm only speaking anecdotally from people I've been friends with.
Absolutely fine. And would you be open to that person potentially reaching out to you to maybe connect them with somebody who's in that side of the industry?
Yeah, for sure.
That would be
I
great.
can do that.
Thank you. So somebody actually asked a really interesting question, and this is actually open to anybody to answer, but I think it would be interesting to hear your perspective on how the pandemic has really impacted you mentally, other people within the industry, and just in general. How is your industry potentially changed through the pandemic and your work?
Oh, yeah, the pandemic was pretty hard. So I was at Naughty Dog last March. Last March was when we all started working from home, and we had no idea how long it was going to last. So they told us, just take a test kit home and leave your workstation here because we'll probably be back in a few weeks. But we were so wrong. So it definitely slowed everything down because we were used to getting a game build within a few minutes. And then we had to, because we moved from home, everything was a lot slower. We were all sharing the VPN network. So it was super hard to work with, and it took hours to get a build. So in general, it really slowed down our work, and it was scary because we had no idea what was happening. We no longer could collaborate closely because we're used to just walking over to someone's desk and tapping them on the shoulder, but now we just had to ping them on Slack or through the internet, and we might miss those messages. So getting through that was pretty tough. I left Naughty Dog after the Last of Us Part 2 shipped, and I actually joined Riot Games last July. So still working from home. They shipped everything to my home, and I don't even have a work badge. So it's interesting. I've met my new team members all online, all through Google. I haven't met them in person yet. But I mean, gaming wise, it brought a lot of people to play games. So that part was interesting. I feel like it made the industry better for gamers, but it's also weird working from home. And I know some companies are even allowing work from home permanently, but Riot Games is more towards let's bring everyone back to the office when it's safe.
Great, thank you. Somebody asked what sparked your interest, your initial interest to pursue electrical engineering?
It was when I took Physics 1. I was really interested in the way circuits worked, and I've always had, I mean, I've been fascinated with like lightning storms and magnets as a kid. So just seeing something light up really piqued my interest, and that's why I pursued electrical engineering.
Cool. Have you guys ever hired someone who doesn't play games but is passionate about the gaming industry? And this person actually said that they have motion sickness, so Valorant is out of their range. And I actually have motion sickness too, so I completely understand.
Yeah.
Very challenging.
Yeah, for sure. That's something we tried to address. Even at Naughty Dog, we tried to address motion sickness issues. I don't know much about what testing was done for that at Valorant, but we definitely care. You don't have to play the game at all. I've known people that as soon as they join Riot Games, their desire to play any other game just tanked, and they like doing normal things outside of work, like, I don't know, exercising and playing the piano. But they just have to, they do what they must at work, like they'll enter the game, but just get through it quickly, use the debug commands. But for sure, you don't have to play the games that Riot Games has or any game in general. If you have a passion for it, they'll definitely hire you.
Cool. Can you actually explain a little bit more about what a QA person does on a daily basis?
Yeah, my work can vary. So we have, most companies will use different software, but we use Jira to track issues in the game. So whenever something comes up, I'm trying to think of an example, something that's public. Or is something that was publicly called out recently. A a patch went out about a month ago that caused, or we think has caused, some egregious frames per second drop on certain AMD cards. And it was really interesting because when people on Twitter or Reddit were calling this out, they thought it affected everyone. So what I did is I had to go into basically our telemetry and I look for the players that have the specific AMD card that had this complaint. And I was able to then put it on a graph and see that it wasn't affecting every single player. So I was able to make the data-informed decision that we're just going to keep monitoring this, but it's not something worth investigating really deeply, because sometimes an issue will occur on live where we just kind of stop everything we're working on until we fix that issue. And then we can just push it out, not waiting till the next patch. It'll just be a hot fix. So my work can vary. If there are issues that pop up, we will address them immediately, or we might make the decision to not until the next patch. And whenever an engineer makes a code change, I basically work with them to make sure that change doesn't break the game.
Well, that's super helpful. Thank you. And I know you touched on this a little bit during that answer, but if you can speak more broadly in the language software you use as a QA, both at Riot Games and at your last role.
The language software. So we use Unreal for Valorant, and that uses C++. But if you're doing an automated test, that will be Python. At Naughty Dog, their engine is in C++, but they also have their own proprietary language, kind of, that's based off of Lisp. And so I would say C++ and Python are the languages we use.
Great. Can you talk about the time it took you to transition into gaming companies after starting at PG&E? Like how was it being patient to really get to where you wanted to go, and what your experience was like at PG&E?
Ooh, I really liked PG&E. It's a great company to be at, and a lot of people are there for life and they'll just retire. And I felt like I wasn't getting a lot of growth, even though I really loved the team I was working with. So I spent about 2.5 years from there, and that's when I made the decision. It's like, okay, I think now it's time to leave and try to be in the area where the gaming companies are. So even after PG&E, I joined a startup, and it wasn't even gaming related. I just wanted to be in the area. And because I had no idea how to get in the gaming industry, since my background was electrical engineering, I wasn't a strong programmer, so I couldn't be a software engineer. I wasn't a game designer, an artist, or an animator, or an audio engineer. So I was like, what could I possibly do? And that's actually why I applied for quality assurance. It was because at the startup, I was essentially doing everything, and I was ensuring the quality of the product we were making. So it took, how long was that? It took about 5 years after graduating.
So you were into gaming before you started
Yeah.
at your current role. Okay.
Yes.
And somebody actually asked what games were your favorite and what are your favorite currently?
Oh, so growing up with games, I was really into like Super Mario Brothers and Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter. There was a period where I just stopped playing games altogether, and then I picked it up. I think League of Legends was a game that kind of brought me back into it. Also Portal 2, that's one of my favorite games of all time. And I'm trying to think what else. I only played the Naughty Dog titles within the last few years. So all the Uncharted series and The Last of Us. I played Hades recently. That's a good game. But I would say Portal 2 is my favorite.
So how much of your day, when you actually were at the office or actually even at home, do they allow you guys to play games in addition to what you do on a regular basis?
Honestly, well, it depends on where you work. Because if you're at a gaming studio that's trying to ship out a game, depending on where it is in the cycle, you could have a lot of time to do that sort of thing. But like towards the end at Naughty Dog, I was working almost 12-hour days. And here at Riot Games, since we're a live service, there's really no need to crunch all the time. My days are typically 8 hours, but they're really flexible. If you have nothing to do, you could just take a break and play a game. Yeah, it really depends. Some days are busier than others.
You actually just touched on a word that somebody brought to our attention. So you talked about crunch. So the question somebody brought up is, the gaming industry is known for crunch culture. Have you experienced it, and how do you deal with it?
Yeah, but it's weird. At PG&E, I also worked overtime some days. It depends on how much work needed to be done, because basically my role at PG&E was making construction packages, and I wanted to make sure they were delivered on time because we had a department metric to meet. So there were days where I even slept at work. So I feel like it's not just the gaming industry that has crunch, it's everywhere you go. I've heard from people that work at SpaceX, they can have 16-hour days, but that's only if it's close to a launch. It's not going to be all the time. So when I came to Naughty Dog, I was like, oh, this seems normal. Like, it's a lot of tech companies are like this too. So it's weird. No one forced us to stay. I do want to say that, like, they weren't saying, oh, you need to work this much time, but people who have that worth ethic, like, oh, I want to make sure this is done, then that kind of drives them to stay longer.
What was your exact role at PG&E?
I was a design drafter, and specifically I was in the IT engineering department.
And what does that do, or what did you do?
Basically, I worked with the IT engineers. We would look at all the substations that were in the area, because there are also a bunch of IT equipment, and we would trace I'm trying to think of the word, the network lines. We would replace old equipment, and I would draw out those diagrams.
Cool. So I have another question about culture for you. Can you talk a little bit about the gender dynamics at your current company, and maybe at your previous company as well? The ratio of female employees, if you know it, and any culture pluses and minuses for female engineers?
Ooh, So most of the places I've gone to, there have been more male to female ratio. And especially in my degree in particular, electrical engineering, I was the only girl in a lot of my classes. So the ratio was bad from the very beginning. I think PG&E, although I worked with mostly males in my particular team and also the floor I was in, I think the ratio was best at PG&E. It's just they were in other departments. Then when I moved from PG&E to startup, the ratio was pretty bad. There were like 25 male engineers and then 4 females for the whole company. And when I left the startup to join Naughty Dog, I think the ratio was pretty good. It might have been like 40% female, 60% male. I'm not totally sure on the numbers, but it felt like I did see more female at Naughty Dog. And then Riot Games, it's also hard to tell. I don't know the exact numbers, but my particular team, it's just male, but I know there are females within Riot. I just don't see them that often. And that is something we're trying to improve on, getting more females in the industry. So the other part of the question was what are pluses and minuses for that? Or
yeah, just some, are there any really strong positives culture-wise to being a female engineer at the company?
At Riot Games in particular, they have a channel for women, and I know if like anything were ever to happen to you or you feel uncomfortable, they try to find a group that you can identify with. So I really liked that. I'm trying to think what else. I'm not sure. I mean, the ideal world is you just take gender out of everything and we're all equal, but I know it's hard when the ratio isn't even.
No, that's completely okay. And actually, this touches a little bit about something else I want to ask you about, your D&I experience there. Can you talk about that and what role that really plays within the company? How do the how does the leadership view D&I within the company and the importance of it?
Yeah, for sure. So when I first heard about diversity and inclusion, it was because one of my own team members was kind of the lead member of it. So he was looking for more people to join the group since some members had previously left the company. And because I was really wanting to bring more females into Riot Games or the gaming industry in general, I became interested and I wanted to do more outreach events with them, but you could basically do anything you wanted. Another thing I'm pushing for is accessibility. So that's something I brought up to D&I, and we basically meet with the executive producers, Anna Donlin and Arnar, and we tell them what our plan is, what we're trying to do, and they will take our feedback. So they listen to D&I very, I'm trying to think of the right word to say it. Like we help them become a better company overall. So diversity inclusion, it's weird because it's not a title or a role that you just interview. It's kind of something that's done on the side outside of your normal job.
So a couple people have asked some questions regarding QA. So somebody says, it sounds like you are currently in leadership skills. Could you tell us about some of the challenges that come with leading QA?
When you don't know a system fully, it is hard to tell the QA vendors what they should be looking out for. So when I first joined Riot Games, I mean, Valorant it was newly launched, so they didn't expect me to know it fully, but that part was difficult. I had to ask for a lot of help, and you have to be okay with that. It can feel weird, like, oh, I don't want to bother them too much, but they actually expect that from you. So basically asking for a lot of help is a challenging part. Does that answer the question fully, or?
Uh-oh, did we lose Mindy?
Oh, I think Mindy has frozen, so I'm going to jump in. There's some more questions about QA. So someone says, how is the pace of the workflow in the QA environment in comparison to other roles that you've seen?
Well, it definitely comes in waves. But I've experienced that both at Naughty Dog and at Riot Games. It really depends on what's coming down the pipeline. So that will depend on what features are going in. There are some sprints we have that there's hardly not much is going in, so my work will be pretty light. And then there are other days where my particular team in general will put in a bunch of different changes. So I have to work on testing plans and making sure that gets validated before the end of the sprint cycle.
Someone else is asking about the pace of the workflow in the QA environment compared to other roles that you've seen.
Oh, I mean, compared to other roles that I've seen, I feel like it could just come in waves for everyone because it really depends on where we are in the sprint. Are we having a lot of features that are going out, or is it going to be a pretty laid back cycle?
Someone also asked an interesting question about you being an electrical engineer, and then how do you work as a QA engineer at in Naughty Dog?
Well, at Naughty Dog, I was a QA analyst, so I was just testing the game, and I didn't become a QA engineer until I joined Riot Games. But I have been able to use my electrical engineering background through just knowing what the hardware is. It kind of helps debug certain issues because my team in particular works with performance. Part of my role is also making recommended builds. So knowing how the CPU works with the GPU.
So I'm going to ask a question that I have genuinely no idea what it means, and I apologize to Alex. Well, his first part of the question I know, which is, did you ever have personal projects prior to joining the game industry? His next part of the question is thoughts on Dodge, hashtag DCTM. Now, I have genuinely no idea what that is, and if you don't either, that's fine. But if you can speak on it, that would be great.
So yeah, I definitely have personal projects prior to joining, and I think projects are great in general. People still work on something on the side even now, even when they're, fully hired, just because it's something fun to do and it keeps you growing. One thing I did even when I was at school is I would join hackathons and I would just build something over a weekend. Like I've made a pressure sensor coaster that tells you when your mug has coffee or not. I made the jacket from Back to the Future where the sleeves can roll up automatically, but that was with the team. And lately before joining the games industry, I was trying to learn more about that. So I would do simple programming assignments and I downloaded Unreal and just tried playing around with it. Thoughts on Dodge? I think Elon Musk is manipulating the market. I don't know. It's going to reach $1 soon, probably.
That's more information than I have ever heard that word before. So thank you. So I'm going to ask a question on behalf of Arturo. He says, my name is Arturo and I want to ask you, I've been designing some characters because one of my passions is to create my own game. What requirements do I need to have to land a job in a game company?
Nice. What requirements do you need to have? That's tough because I came into Naughty Dog with very little gaming experience at all. I think they just took a chance on me and they wanted anyone who had a passion for the industry and wanted to go further. But that's not the only way in. I'm not saying like, oh, you should go to QA. I think if you know what role you want to go for exactly, you should then look at the careers page and see what they require for that.
Great. And Arturo also asked, is it hard to be accepted at Riot? What challenges did you face through the process?
Accepted like interview wise or accepted as a person?
That's a great question. I actually would, if you could speak to both, I think that would be really helpful.
So yeah, the interview process is pretty intense. It took me 7 interviews total if you count the phone screen with the recruiter. So it's 1 phone screen followed by 2 separate phone screens, and then there was an on-site, but it was all virtual since we're still working from home. And the virtual on-site was 4 separate 1-hour interviews in a day. So that part was pretty intense. They really care about how well you work with a team and can you communicate well. It's not even if you know what the right answer is, it's about how you communicate and your thought process. So, and they also look for culture fit. I have been rejected from Riot Games in the past. I interviewed, I think in 2017, and I made it to the 2nd round, but I didn't, my skill set wasn't strong enough, so I couldn't make it. And yeah, it's a fairly difficult process, but I believe that anyone can do it. And it's not, you don't need a referral either, because I've heard some people say like, oh, the only way to get in is if you know an employee there. That's not true, because I applied online and then I got interviewed and went through that process.
And actually, speaking on that, would you be open to some of our students reaching out to you if they had direct questions or are interested in applying?
Yeah, for sure.
Great. Yeah, at the end, we'll have you put in your contact information into the chat. Don't worry about it right now, but we'll make sure we can do that. And actually, speaking of that, if you can talk about the keys to getting off to a strong start at the new company. I know you said you were rejected from Riot at first, and then obviously you have a job there now. How was it, your first few weeks, few months into actually becoming a solid employee there? What was your experience like?
It still feels like I'm not a solid employee some days because I'm always learning. Because yeah, the first couple of weeks, it was pretty nice. They have an entire week called D-Noob, and you're just in a class with all other people that are starting, and they go through the history of Riot, what they kind of expect from you. They even assign you to have a buddy in your discipline. So I was assigned to another QA engineer, and she just kind of taught me the ropes. But I don't know. That's a hard question.
That's fine. You can think about it for a while.
Yeah.
I know that you went from PG&E to Naughty Dog to Riot Games, and you're pretty young. At least you seem very young. I could be wrong. And it's an interesting fact to see that you've gone from company to company, which is actually really great. We typically see some of our MESA students find a job and stay there for a while. So can you talk about your experience on going from company to company, the positives and the negatives with that? Has it been negative in terms of potentially burning bridges or loyalty? Would you recommend that, or would you recommend people stick where they are?
Well, if you're unhappy with a company, I definitely feel like it's just better to leave. I've known one of the lead designers at Valorant actually came from Naughty Dog, and he was only there for 4 months. So that seems like a pretty quick turnaround, but I don't think it was seen very negative for him to do that. Plus he's in a lead role now. So if you're at a job and you're unhappy, I would say definitely leave. It's usually best to just start interviewing at places so you're not without a job. About loyalty, I think companies do prefer not having a quick turnaround, but I think it's also up to the company to make sure that people are staying. It really depends on how well they treat their employees. I thought PG&E was great, and it was hard to leave them for sure. But I just knew I wanted to work in games, so that's why I left. I just had this deeper passion to pursue.
I know we're jumping around a little bit, but somebody asked this question a while ago, so I want to make sure I get to it. You mentioned rumors on social media platforms regarding bugs and glitches. So how does your team handle bug rumors?
We just try to see if it's reproducible first, and we try to match our specs with whatever the player has. And it's really hard making a game for a computer because people make so many custom machines all the time, and it's not even that. All the software on your computer can affect how well the game runs too. So you could have something that's causing your CPU to overclock, and that could actually mess up the performance. So if we see something, if we see one comment, and it really depends on how much traction it has. If other people are saying like, yeah, I'm experiencing this too, then we'll look into it further. We try to match our specs to whatever they have, but sometimes we can't reproduce the issue. And we are able to see through internal metrics, we're able to see all the client data, and we can make it to where it's their specific CPU and GPU. And we can then determine like, oh, okay, it is affecting this group of people, or maybe it's not. So that's how we tend to make the decisions, or whenever there's a rumor out there.
Great. When you interviewed, did you get to pick each project to join, or did you get assigned to Valorant?
So I actually, when you go to the Riot Careers page, it'll already tell you what project it's for. So for this one in particular, it was for Valorant, and it was for performance. And I was very interested in the performance aspects of it, and that's what I interviewed for.
Cool.
Yeah.
In your experience, have you seen or known any coworkers who use their personal game projects to get hired into Riot Games? Or any other company for that matter?
I'm trying to think. I really can't think of any specific person who's been hired for a personal project. It's usually they were already at the studio, and then they made something with that studio's engine. But I mean, I imagine it could be from a personal project. I just haven't known anyone.
Okay, cool. This is a really interesting question that I'm so glad somebody posed, and I hope that you, if anybody else has some thoughts on this, please feel free to put it in the chat. I think this is a great question for anyone to really think about. Did you ever have some self-doubt while going through school and while joining the workforce and currently? And
Yes.
what helped you overcome it?
Yeah, definitely. Oh my gosh. Even before I decided engineering was going to be a major, I had no idea what it was like. And I think I Googled like, what do engineers do? And when I read the description, it was super vague, but I felt like I couldn't do it because it sounded scary. But once I actually just went through school, I realized it's not so bad. And I think you just have to jump in the water or just go for it, because you don't know how it's going to be, but it really isn't so bad once you're in it. And there's always going to be people around you to help. Like, they won't let you drown, is what I'm trying to say.
Are there resources at Riot Games that you can turn to if you're, what's the HR experience there and the company culture, and do you feel supported within the company if you are having difficulties?
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to think. I know, like for my particular role, I'm part of Riot QA, so there is a Slack channel we have, and I could just ask them any question. But if I actually need mentorship or guidance, I can also ask for that as well. And people are just so willing to help. For everything else, like as an employee, I'm trying to think. I know there are a lot of support channels, especially since I didn't know anyone at Riot and I was just starting as a person in quarantine and remote. I wanted to meet new people. So Riot actually made this program where they randomly assign you to someone and you just have like a short Google Meet chat.
Can you talk about any specifics our students should potentially put on their resume or cover letters when applying to a gaming company?
I could share my resume with those people if they want to know, because every job I applied for, I definitely just had to practically make a new resume all over. And I made it as close as the position I was applying for as possible, if that makes sense. They tend to, I think HR in general, or recruiters, they look for certain keywords, and that tends to be with what the role has. So you want to change your resume every time.
And speaking on that, what can you do if you don't have any gaming company experience, but you're interested in a role within the gaming industry? Like, how do you make yourself attractive to the company?
So I think at that point, it would be super helpful to have a personal project, and you would put the personal project kind of as if it were a job, but maybe like just at a different category, and you can talk about what you did specifically, like what engine you worked with, what you were doing. And I would think that's the best way to go about it.
Cool. That's super helpful. Can you talk a little bit about your career goals? What your plans are within the company or in the future if you decide to leave Riot Games? What are you looking for in the next 5, 10, 15 years?
What am I looking for? Oh man. It's funny that you say that, because now that I am at Riot Games, part of me is feeling like, what's next? What do I want to do? It's kind of like the movie. I don't know if you've seen the movie Soul by Pixar, but I share the same sentiment as near the end of that movie. So yeah, I have been thinking about what's next for me. I did apply to be an astronaut last year when they opened up the applicant pool, but of course the chance for that is so small. Although if it ever did happen, I see myself working in the space industry next. That's probably a long time from now.
We actually have a MESA alum in space right now.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
That's so cool.
And just so you know, Stephanie, keep applying because he applied several times and was rejected. And then now he's staying at the International Space Station.
That's
Oh my
right.
God, that's so cool. I wonder if I heard him talk at a conference before. What's his
Yeah,
name?
I'm sure you did. Victor Glover.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. He was there. That's
Space
amazing.
right now.
Wow.
And actually, speaking of MESA and being an alum, how can MESA really work to engage and mobilize our alums more effectively? Obviously, you're engaged, Victor's engaged with us, and our students who are participating. How can they get involved once they're past the program, and what do you recommend for us?
Ooh. So when I graduated, I tried to participate in MESA programs whenever I was asked to do it. But people had to come to me, which I think is the negative part because I'm probably missing out on so many events that I don't know are out there. For example, the mock interviews, I believe that was done through someone within PGD. They must have sent out an email, and Dr. Ozer would invite me to certain events. So it was always by invitation. I don't know, maybe having more social media presence or something that broadcasts the events that are happening would be helpful.
Great. Yeah, we're working on that through Jumpstart. And I think that these events are definitely our start, which is really exciting. So thank you so much. And, would you encourage students to stay connected with the MESA community? Do you feel like it's having a positive impact on you post-graduation?
Yeah, for sure. Especially since I was at the conference that Victor Glover was at. I spoke about my life as a student right after he presented, and I was just blown away by the fact that I was following an astronaut. So I really enjoyed that, and it feels good to be part of the MESA program. It feels good to give back, especially since I benefited so much from the program itself.
Cool. Just a couple more questions, and then we can close up. The first one is: if you include your works with gaming software or experience with C++, plus other programming languages in your resume, do you think they would consider it?
Yeah. And I'm trying to answer this correctly because I know certain teams, even within Riot Games, we use 3 different game engines. So if you were to join one team that works on Unity, which is C#, and you had a game that was written in C++, I'm sure they would accept you as long as the work was good and you were passionate for it, because they expect you to just be able to learn the other language on the job. So it doesn't have to match whatever you're applying for perfectly, especially since some studios have their own proprietary engine or language anyway.
Great. And I think this will be our last question before we close up. So thank you for asking all of your questions, everyone. Is it common for people in the gaming industry to want to go on to other industries, like because of burnout? I think that's a really great question.
Yeah, I would say so. But yeah, I'm trying to think. I know lately, especially on Valorant, a lot of people have left, but that is because that game has been in production for the past 7 years. So if you're working on something for 7 years and it's finally out, you want to work on something new, and that's totally understandable. So even Riot Games expects this. We're probably going to have a whole new set of people working on Valorant, and it's just going to take it further. But that also allows the game to grow and to change to what's popular. I think that's also why League of Legends was so successful. They don't have the same people that were working on it originally. I think very few are still working on League that were there since the beginning. And they've been able to grow so much, like they included anime, and that became super popular. So yeah, it is expected, but I wouldn't say it's just as a result from burnout. If you're just wanting to work on a new project entirely, that's totally understandable.
Great. Well, I want to thank Stephanie so much for her time today, for her openness to share. And Stephanie, if you wouldn't mind putting in your contact information into the chat,
Yeah.
either your LinkedIn or your personal email, whichever you prefer, or both is absolutely fine. Please, everyone, use the chat to say thank you to Stephanie. We're super, super grateful for her time, and hope to have connect more with Riot Games in the future. It sounds like we have some really interested students in getting into that industry, which is exciting to see. So
Awesome.
thank you again. And there will be a survey in the chat. Danielle just submitted that. So please go ahead and click that link to all our students and share your thoughts on the event today. Thank you.
Thank you.